Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is really no other way to say it. They're coming for our guns. That's right. The national government, or at least the ANC, has never absolutely been happy with the fact that ordinary citizens own guns. Their reasons has always been that it's crime related, and the fact that so many people have guns makes it impossible for the police to really control where most of these guns are. And so they have always sought ways to try and limit the amount of access that ordinary South Africans would have to guns. This has been sort of a creeping problem with new and more, I guess you could say, onerous legislations constantly coming out, making it even harder to get guns. Nowadays, it can take months, if not years, for you to actually qualify in order to get a gun. But the one thing that we have been privileged in South Africa for is the fact that if you really want a gun, there are always avenues to get it. And I mean legally. There are, of course, a lot of avenues to getting it illegally. And in fact, it's far easier to get an illegal gun than what it is to get a legal gun in South Africa. But why? What is the whole reason for the ANC's sort of dislike of guns? Well, it's the same reason that every single communist and controlling regime throughout the history of the world has had with guns. You see, a citizenry that is armed is far more difficult to control. And before people say, well, the government has tanks and the government has massive guns, I ask you this: would it be easier for a government to violently subjugate its people if the people had no guns, or if the people at least had some guns? I would agree. The government does have, well, at least the government should have. In South Africa, we might be lucky in this regard. The government should have far superior firepower. Where that doesn't help is fighting a citizenry that first outnumbers whatever the government can throw at it. But more importantly, whenever you get into urban warfare, whenever you get into cities and where you're doing battle in sort of very close quarters, numbers and superior firepower doesn't really help you, because a gun is a gun. If I shoot you with it, you die. It doesn't matter if you have a bazooka, a bunch of grenades, or a plane. Unless, of course, the government's aim is to eradicate its people, which might be a strategy, but that would immediately get the international community involved, and so governments will rarely go that route. The fact of the matter is, no one can argue with the logic that having guns is always better at stopping tyrannical governments than not having the guns. So fundamentally, this has been the ANC's thorn in their side. The fact that you have a citizenry where a lot of people in South Africa have guns. Not to mention the fact that we live in an incredibly violent nation. Every single year, over 27,000 people are killed in this nation. There are rapes that occur every single 30 seconds, I believe it is. Violent harassment that occurs every 45 seconds in this country. We do have a lot of issues. And for a lot of people, having a gun is that guarantee to safety. In a lot of cases, the difference between being murdered in your bed and not being murdered is the gun that you had in order to stave off the offenders. The problem that we have, of course, is that we have an incredibly immoral and inept government. A government that has always extended far more laws and rights to the criminals of this nation, mostly because they are the criminals of this nation, than what they actually afford to the innocent civilians of this nation that are law-abiding. But okay, so the latest challenge to the gun ownership in South Africa comes in the form of a new piece of legislation. It is the Firearms Control Amendment Bill that has been tabled in Parliament by the ANC and specifically by the Minister of Police. I'm assuming he is very much part of this. But if the reports on the latest version of the Firearms Control Amendment Bill are accurate, then this bill represents one of the most dangerous assaults yet on South Africans' right to safety and self-defense. This is effectively what the DA is saying. They're strongly rejecting it. When you go over to Business Tech, they sort of reveal a lot of what the new bill is going to try to do. And when you read it, it sort of seems very plausible on the face of it, which is normally how government legislation is panned out. Or they pen it in such a way that you can't really disagree with it. It sounds perfectly fine. Providing for the verification by accredited associations of application to possess a firearm. So anyone that could own a firearm, think private security firms, would now have to apply for the rights to own these guns, and they would have to prove that owning these guns would be necessary. Again, in this, you can literally just read it as South Africa currently have far more private police officers in this country, about double the number of private police than what we have actual police. If a government wants to be tyrannical, the last thing it needs is a private army that has the ability to stop them, providing for the period of validity of all competency certificates to be 5 years. Effectively, you would have to reapply for your gun ownership every single 5 years, and anyone that has ever tried to get a gun in this country will know this is a very arduous process. It takes a long time. The police are incredibly sluggish to actually get it done, and it costs quite a lot of money. So every 5 years, this would just create another nightmare in the same way that we see with traffic or driving licenses, where it eventually just overwhelms the system. But of course, for the ANC, they always think that they can do better, providing for conditions under which a firearm license for occasional hunting or sports shooting may be issued. All of these provisions already exist. You already need to apply for a license in order to actually get anything done. You only need to apply for a license if you want to be a hunter or anything of that regard. So what does the new Firearm Amendment Bill do? Well, it places the right to who may own a gun firmly in the hands of the Minister of Police. So think in terms of the Minister of Trade and Industries in South Africa currently having the only power to determine how many people may work at which companies of any given race. Similar to that, the ANC, if we start to put these laws together, the president, for example, a few years ago, I believe it was in 2021, 2022, moved the intelligence agencies of South Africa into the presidency. So the president now is the sole owner of intelligence. Well, intelligence agencies, I should say, because our president clearly doesn't own intelligence. The man never knows what's actually going on in the country. But then you have the Minister of Trade and Industry through Employment Equity Act. He now has the ability to tell companies exactly what they need to do. Then you have the Firearms Bill that is moving all of the power solely to the Minister of Police that can decide on a whim, no one gets guns. And you can't do anything about it because, well, this is the bad thing. I asked Grok to sum it up because I could read you the South African Constitution. The problem is, in order to make a case for gun law, you would have to read through the entirety of the South African Constitution, and that is because the idiots of the National Party that were at the time debating and reasoning and negotiating with the ANC never thought about what would happen if the ANC actually becomes a corrupt government. You see, the founding fathers of America had the foresight to understand that if you want to enshrine a Bill of Rights, if you want to enshrine a bill that protects the citizenry against the government, you need to give the citizens the ability to actually enforce said Bill of Rights. And so the Second Amendment was born in America. Our fathers, I guess you could say, decided, we won't actually put it in the Constitution. And I can guarantee you it was at the behest of the ANC. They didn't want it in the Constitution. And because these people were wholly driven by money and powerful interests, they were just like, okay, never mind. Because our Constitution doesn't actually give us the right to freedom or to the right to own guns. If you look, for example, there are certain sections, like Section 12, for example, the freedom and security of the person, that guarantees that every person has the right to freedom and the right to security. And some gun lobbyists have argued that, hey, this gives you the right to have a firearm because you must have the right to be able to defend yourself and the right to life and security. But that doesn't explicitly say that you need to own a gun. So ultimately, this boils down to whatever legislation exists. So people who want to make the argument, well, you're protected by the Constitution. No, you're not. You are wholly at the mercy of the ANC, and the ANC has shown themselves to be an enemy of the people. Firmly, squarely, absolutely. Ian Cameron makes a phenomenal argument here. But more importantly, even if you look past that, if we just look at why the police is saying they need this new amendment bill, it's because they can't keep track of all of the guns in South Africa because the National Registry has completely broken down. And according to most studies, it is effectively non-existent. A study found that the problem lies with the South African Police Service and the total collapse of the Central Firearms Register. That went completely wrong. But it's up here, right? So the study found it here. But then you look, for example, what is currently happening in our government. Cameron cited the example of a former SAPS colonel, Christian Prinsloo, who stole and sold 2,000 state-issued firearms to gangsters. These police guns stolen from state armories were linked to over 1,000 murders and 1,400 attempted murders in the Western Cape between 2010 and 2016. South Africa's acting Minister of Police, Firas Kachalia, revealed that 4,124 South African police-owned firearms were reported as lost or stolen from 2020. Last year, Ground Up reported that an estimated 1,800 state-owned firearms are being lost or stolen every single year. You see, that is because currently there are 502 state-owned institutions who own a combined 2.2 million firearms. The only state institution that needs to, or that actually does report on the guns that they lose, is the South African Police Service. The military, they have lost countless guns. It never gets reported. None of the other state enterprises have to report the amount of guns. Well, they technically have to, but they don't. The amount of guns that they lose. So effectively, we are being killed by the guns that should be the ones protecting us. The fact that they want to remove these guns from the streets and from the citizens and the hands of the citizens just speaks again to the tyrannical nature of this government. And Cameron did warn that if they try to do this, they will have a fight on their hands that they will not win. And I actually can agree with that. I have more than enough friends and family members who are all gun owners, and all of them have said the same thing. If they come for our guns, it's war. And I genuinely believe that it is, because if you're an ordinary South African living in this country, you understand just how dangerous it is. We have bars in front of our windows. We have security gates, literally limiting access to our own properties. We live in a constant heightened state of awareness because of the levels of crime in this nation. And now the government that has proven themselves completely incapable of fighting said crime wants to go, hey, you can't have a gun to kill the criminals that we can't catch or stop. We will protect you. No one is going to believe that. So if the South African government really wants a war to break out in this country, I would say a premature war, because I do think war is coming for this nation. But if they want a premature one, they should try and take the guns. It will start and it will not end, because as it happens, it's not just white people this time that own guns. Black people own a crap ton of guns, and all of them own it, or at least the majority of them own those guns for self-protection. If the state suddenly moved in and said you can no longer own those guns, it will unite the people of this country in a way that the ANC isn't ready for. So my suggestion to the government is let this go. You have proven that you can't keep the citizens of this nation safe. You have proven that you are the criminals that we need protection from. We're not handing over our guns. It's not happening. So you can go play on the train tracks for all I care, but it's just not happening. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of this. What's going to happen if they try to take our guns? Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel. To become a patron, link in the description down below, or the join button right below this video. I've decided not to add the names of patrons because I've had a couple of people ask me to not show their names because they're working for companies that might not want them to support conservative voices. And so out of that, I'm going to not include it. But let me know if you think names should be shown, you want to be seen as supporting the channel. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, so please reach out to me on that in the comment section down below. And if you like what I do and you think more people should have access to it, just hit that like button and hit that subscribe button and share this video with as many people as possible, because this is a very important issue. As always, I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.